A little African girl knocked on an Arab executive's door in the rain, and the note she gave him made him cry. It was a stormy night in Casablanca, the kind of night where no one dares to leave their home unless it's a matter of life or death. But through the cold rain and wind, a fragile silhouette stood, soaked to the bone at the gate of a marble estate. She was no older than 6, barefoot, shivering, and clutching something tightly in her small hand. When the billionaire Arab executive opened the door, expecting a security report or an urgent call, he saw her, silent, trembling, and then she reached up and handed him a folded, half-torn note. What he read shattered every wall he'd ever built around his heart and changed his life forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might touch your soul. What happens next will leave you speechless. This is not just a story about wealth or power, but about something far deeper. The storm raged like something out of a biblical parable. Wind howled against the tall glass windows of Zaid al-Rami's estate, bending the palm trees in his garden until they looked like they might snap. Rain poured from the heavens with no mercy, pounding the marble tiles of his driveway and flooding the edges of the road that led to his front gate. Inside, Zaid was finishing his evening prayer, his long robe flowing behind him as he moved across the hand-woven rug in his private prayer room. The rest of the mansion was silent, dimly lit with warm sconces. His assistants had all gone home for the night, and the only sound apart from the storm was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Zaid was a man of structure. At 45, he was one of the wealthiest real estate magnates in the Middle East, with towers in Dubai, developments in Abu Dhabi, and luxury hotels spread across Europe. But his fortune had not made him soft. His gaze was sharp, his posture proud, his rules strict. Few dared to cross him. He had no wife, no children, not since the accident. That night, as he poured himself a glass of black tea in the kitchen and leaned on the cool marble counter, something unexpected cut through the storm. A knock, a single, soft knock. Then another. Zaid frowned. The front gate was heavily secured, with guards and cameras monitoring the perimeter. Visitors didn't just appear on his doorstep, and certainly not on a night like this. He grabbed his phone and checked the security feed. Static, a brief flicker. Then, a blurry image of what looked like a child. He paused. "What is this?" he muttered. "A child? In this weather?" Zaid placed the cup down and walked to the heavy double doors at the front of the house. The wind pushed against them as he unlocked and pulled one open, and there she was, a little girl, African, thin, soaked head to toe, curls flattened against her scalp. Her dress, a simple, faded green fabric, clung to her like wet paper. Her skin glistened from the rain, and her lips were pale, trembling. She was barefoot. Her feet were muddy and scraped. But her eyes were large, round, and deeply brown, not from fear, but from something else, something quieter, a kind of ancient sadness that didn't belong in a child so small. Zaid blinked, stunned. "Where are your parents?" he asked, his voice instinctively firm. The girl didn't answer. She simply reached into her pocket, a small, half-torn pocket on the side of her dress, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her hand was shaking as she offered it to him. Zaid hesitated. He had been in boardrooms with presidents. He had held contracts worth more than the GDP of some countries, but never had a single sheet of paper made his hand tremble before he even touched it. He took it. The girl remained silent. Zaid unfolded the paper, expecting nonsense or maybe a cry for help. Instead, what he saw sent a chill deeper than the rain ever could. To the man who looks like the one in Mama's photo. "If you are him, please, I am not asking for money. I just want to know if you ever loved her. Her name was Amina. My name is Rania." Zaid's heart stopped, literally. For half a second, the organ that had beaten steadily through years of war, loss, and billion-dollar takeovers skipped. Amina, that name hadn't passed his lips in almost 7 years. He looked down at the child again. The curls, the eyes, the curve of her cheekbones. "No, it couldn't be. I need to know where you came from," he said, his voice lower now, not as a command, but as a plea. Still the girl said nothing. She only glanced past him, as if seeking warmth, and then back at his face. Without another word, Zaid stepped aside. "Come inside," he said. "You're freezing." The girl walked in slowly, leaving tiny wet footprints on the ivory floor. She didn't look around in awe like most children would have in a palace like this. She walked straight ahead, sat down on the edge of a rug, and hugged her knees to her chest. Zaid closed the door behind her and watched. He wanted to call security, or a doctor, or someone, anyone, but all he could do was stare at the name on the paper again. Amina. She was the only woman he had ever truly loved. A humanitarian nurse who'd volunteered across West Africa. They had met when Zaid was still building his empire, still reckless and impatient, still full of fire and arrogance. Amina had brought out the better in him, but she had chosen to stay in Africa rather than follow him into his world of private jets and penthouse suites. He remembered the letter she wrote him when she left. "I'm not a woman who can live in golden cages, Zaid. I need the wind, the dust, the people who have nothing and still give everything. And if you ever come back, really come back, maybe you'll find something you weren't expecting." He never came back. Until now. Or rather, she had come to him. His hands clenched the paper. His mouth was dry. The girl, Rania, sneezed softly, still huddled on the rug. Zaid snapped out his trance and moved to the cabinet. He grabbed a thick white towel and walked over, gently placing it around her shoulders. "Do you understand me?" he asked softly. She nodded, barely. "I will call someone to bring food, and I'll prepare a room for you. You are safe here. Do you understand that?" Again, the smallest nod. Zaid stood, breath heavy. His mind was a storm now, more violent than the one outside. If this child was truly Amina's, if she was truly his, the door to the past, long sealed, had just been kicked wide open, not with fire, but with a whisper. And outside, the rain continued to fall, as if trying to wash away the years. The rain didn't stop. It beat on the glass panes all night long, a relentless percussion that underscored Zaid's racing thoughts. He couldn't sleep. He didn't even try. After showing the girl to a guest room and having a housekeeper prepare a hot soup, which he barely touched, he stood for hours in his study, staring at the fire that roared in the marble hearth. He was a man known for decisiveness. In meetings, he could close multi-million-dollar deals in under an hour. But now, alone in the heart of his empire, a single note from a 6-year-old girl had undone all of his certainty. She said her name was Rania, and Amina. Zaid whispered the name again like a prayer, a curse, a memory. He hadn't spoken it in 7 years. He had buried it, locked it deep in a mental vault marked too late. She had chosen her path, and he had chosen his sky-high towers, black-tie galas, and solitude disguised as success. But what if she hadn't told him everything? He walked to the far side of the room and opened a locked drawer in his desk. It creaked softly. Inside was a collection of items he hadn't touched in years, an old field journal, a worn-out beaded bracelet, a postcard from Ghana, and a single photograph. Zaid picked it up carefully. It was faded now, edges curled from time. In it, Amina stood barefoot on a dusty road, smiling, her arm around a small group of local children. Her hair was wrapped in a bright cloth, and her eyes, those fierce, radiant eyes, looked directly into the camera, into him. Zaid ran a thumb across the photo. Had she been pregnant when she left? Had she decided not to tell him? Out of anger? Pride? Or was it something else? He clenched his jaw and stood in the center of the room, torn between fury and heartbreak. If this girl was truly his daughter, the thought slammed into him like thunder. My daughter. It sounded unreal in his head. Zaid al-Rami, the man whose fortune ranked in the top 50 in the Gulf, the man who never married, never even dated after Amina, could have a daughter, a child, flesh of his flesh. But what proof did he have? Only a name, a note, a resemblance, and an ache he couldn't explain. By morning, the storm had passed. The sky was washed clean, pale with the promise of sun. Zaid stood outside the girl's door, hesitating like a stranger in his own house. The hallway smelled of fresh jasmine from the diffusers, and the marble floor reflected the light like water. He knocked softly. "Rania," he called, voice low. No answer. He opened the door gently. The girl was awake, sitting cross-legged on the large white bed, wrapped in a thick towel he had given her the night before. Her curls were dry now, frizzing softly around her small face. She was holding something in her lap, a photograph. Zaid's breath caught. He walked in slowly and knelt beside the bed. "Can I see it?" he asked. She hesitated, then turned the photo toward him. His world stopped. It was Amina, again, older than in the photo he had, holding a baby in her arms. The woman looked thinner, tired, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. The baby was small, curled against her chest, barely weeks old. Zaid touched the edge of the photo, like it might vanish if he pressed too hard. "She kept this?" he asked aloud, more to himself than to Rania. The girl looked at him with quiet eyes. "Mama said you had a heart like a lion, but you forgot where you put it." Zaid blinked. It wasn't just the words. It was how she said them, slowly, softly, like she was quoting something sacred. He sat down on the edge of the bed, rubbing his face. "What happened to your mother?" he asked. The girl looked down. Her fingers clutched the hem of the towel. "She got sick," she said. "A long time. No money. The clinic helped. But then she got too tired. She told me where to find you." Zaid's throat tightened. "She told you my name?" Rania nodded. "She showed me the papers. Said if anything happened, I should find the man in Casablanca, the one who gave her the necklace." Zaid's hand instinctively went to his neck, where a chain once rested. He remembered the necklace, an emerald in gold. He had given it to Amina the night she told him she was leaving. She had said, "Keep a part of me with you." But she had kept the part that mattered. "Rania." Zaid turned to face the girl fully. "I need to ask something important." She met his eyes, calm as stone. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Rania nodded. "You're the man in Mama's photo drawer. She never said bad things. Just she wished you had stayed." A deep pain twisted in his chest. "I should have," he whispered. "I should have followed her. I didn't know." He stopped himself. It was useless to explain adult failures to a child. What mattered now wasn't what he had lost, but what stood in front of him. Rania. She was quiet, too wise for her age. She didn't cry. She didn't complain. She looked like someone who had learned early that the world doesn't always answer when you knock. And yet she had knocked anyway. "Rania," he said gently, "would you like to stay here? I mean for a while, until we figure out what to do next." The girl didn't smile. She didn't show joy. She only tilted her head slightly and asked, "Will you leave, too?" The question landed like a punch to the gut. Zaid swallowed hard. "No, I won't. Even if I get sick?" He didn't blink. "Even then. Even if I cry, I'll hold you." A long pause. Then, for the first time, the girl moved toward him. Slowly. She crawled across the bed and leaned against his side, her small head resting lightly against his chest. Zaid froze, then wrapped his arms around her, carefully, like she was made of glass. He had held billion-dollar contracts in these hands, had shaken hands with kings, signed treaties. But this small body pressing into his ribs, felt heavier and more sacred than anything he had ever known. He closed his eyes, his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled her closer. "I'm here," he whispered. "I swear to you, Rania. I'm here now." And somewhere deep inside the house, past the marble and the chandeliers, a lion's heart, once buried beneath years of silence and ambition, began to beat again. The days that followed were unlike anything Zaid al-Rami had ever lived. His mornings, once regimented with personal trainers, press briefings, and investor calls, were now punctuated by smaller, quieter rituals. Cutting fruit into pieces Rania wouldn't reject, learning how she liked her toast, how she hated noise in the morning, how she never ran, only walked, as if running might draw unwanted attention. She didn't laugh. She barely smiled, but she stayed close to him, always in the same room, always within sight, like a shadow trying to remember it once belonged to light. Zaid had called off his meetings for the week, a move that made headlines in the business world. Rumors swirled online about illness, retirement, even a secret merger. But he ignored it all. For once, the empire could wait. Instead, he focused on the child now living under his roof, and slowly, pieces of her world began to surface. In the second-floor guest room she had made her own, she kept only a small pouch by the bed. One morning, when Zaid entered to ask if she wanted breakfast, she was sitting on a rug, quietly sewing one of the torn corners of her dress. "I can get you new clothes," he offered. She didn't look up. "Mama taught me to fix what I have." He knelt beside her. "Would it upset you if I still bought you some?" She shrugged. "Not if I keep this one." Zaid smiled softly. "Then you'll keep it, and have more." Her hand stopped. Then, for the first time, she looked at him, not through him, and said, "You don't have to buy me things. That's not why I came." He felt a chill run down his arms. "Why did you come?" Her eyes were too big for her face. "Because Mama said people forget who they are when they have too much silence. I think maybe you forgot. She said I might remind you." Zaid swallowed hard. She was right. That afternoon, Zaid stood in his private study, the doors closed, holding the photograph of Amina and the baby again. He had scanned it now, made copies. It never left his sight. But something inside him wouldn't rest. He opened his laptop and began typing. A few minutes later, he was on a call with Dr. Layla Marwain, an old friend and medical specialist in Rabat. She owed him favors, and he needed one now. "Layla," he said quietly, "I need a paternity test." There was silence on the line. "For who?" "For me. And a girl. She's 6. Her name is Rania." Layla exhaled. "Are you sure you want to know?" "I need to know." She agreed to send a discreet nurse the next morning. Zaid didn't tell Rania. He didn't know how to. He hated the thought that she might feel like a stranger being tested, examined, reduced to proof. But something in him, the part shaped by lawyers, contracts, and betrayals, needed certainty. So when the nurse arrived, posing as a housekeeper for discretion, Zaid sat with Rania in the sunroom, pretending it was a routine medical check. The girl never complained. She let the woman swab her cheek, listening with silent patience. Then she looked up at Zaid with a quiet question in her eyes. "Will it change how you look at me?" she asked once the nurse had gone. Zaid felt his heart drop. "No," he said instantly. "Never." "Promise." He nodded. "I promise." She nodded, accepting it. But she didn't sit beside him the rest of the afternoon like she usually did. She went to the garden instead, sat beneath the orange tree, alone, like something in her had curled inward again. The test results would take 3 days. Zaid tried to wait with calm, but it was impossible. Each hour felt heavier than the last. His body moved through the motions, checking emails, reading reports, approving fund transfers. But his mind was elsewhere, always circling back to that note, to Amina's eyes, to Rania's voice asking, "Will it change how you look at me?" He found himself watching her from a distance. How she moved like someone trained not to disturb. How she always looked over her shoulder before entering a new room. How she flinched when the doorbell rang too loud. This wasn't just grief. This was trauma. And he hated himself for not being there sooner. That night, he asked one of the housekeepers to bring in a therapist, someone gentle, experienced with children. No titles, no threats, just kindness. Rania agreed to meet her, but didn't say much. The therapist, after an hour, simply said, "She's seen more than a child ever should, but she's not broken. She's waiting for permission to heal." Zaid didn't sleep that night. On the third morning, the call came. It was Dr. Layla herself. "Zaid," she said calmly, "you are the father." He sat down in his leather chair, fingers digging into the armrest. "I thought I'd feel shock," he said quietly. "But I don't." "What do you feel?" He hesitated. "Grief," he said, "and gratitude." Layla paused. "Don't waste time, old friend. This is a second chance most men never get." He nodded slowly. "Thank you." He hung up, placed the phone on the desk, and looked out the window. In the garden, Rania was sitting on the stone bench again. Same dress, same silence, watching the fountain trickle. He walked down barefoot, in linen pants and a plain white shirt, the wind catching the hem of his sleeves. She didn't turn when he approached. He sat beside her and said nothing for a moment. Then, I know now. Rania tilted her head slightly. You're mine, he said softly. You were always mine. She didn't answer right away. Just looked down at her shoes, ones he had bought, but she had hesitated to wear. Then she whispered, Mama said you would feel it, not just know it. Feel it. Zaid's eyes welled up. I do. I feel it everywhere. And I'm sorry I wasn't there when I should have been. Rania finally looked up. Her voice cracked. You're here now. And for the first time, she reached for his hand, small, brown, soft, and held it. He closed his fingers around hers. Tight, certain. The Empire could wait. For now, he was home. The call came 2 days later, breaking the calm that had finally begun to settle over the Al-Rami estate. Zaid was in the courtyard, showing Rania how to feed the koi in the marble pond. She stood beside him, her small hand gripping the silver tin of flakes, watching with wide eyes as the orange and white fish broke the water surface with sudden, elegant flicks. It was one of the first moments of genuine peace since she arrived. She wasn't smiling, not fully, but her eyes had softened. The shadows were still there, but they no longer swallowed the light. Then the phone rang. Zaid excused himself and walked briskly to the study, leaving Rania with the housekeeper. He recognized the number immediately. Farid Bak, his oldest rival in business, and perhaps the only man in Morocco who could threaten his dominance in the real estate empire. Zaid answered with measured calm. Farid. Zaid, the man said, with that slick oil-on-glass tone he always used. I heard a rumor that you canceled your appearance at the Arab Investment Summit. Zaid didn't respond immediately. I did, he said. Strange. You were supposed to announce the Tangier waterfront project. Hundreds of millions on the table, and suddenly you vanish? People are talking. Zaid leaned against the desk, gazing out the window. Let them talk. Rumors say you're distracted, that something or someone has changed your focus. Zaid's eyes narrowed. What do you want, Farid? A meeting, not as rivals. As men, I have an offer. It concerns the land rights you've been chasing in Western Sahara. Zaid had been fighting for those rights for over 3 years. He hesitated. When? Tomorrow. My villa in Marrakesh. Zaid glanced back at the window. He could see Rania from here, still standing near the pond, watching the water like it held secrets only she could read. I'll consider it, he said. You'd better. Opportunities don't knock twice, not even for you. Farid hung up. That evening, Zaid stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of his suit jacket. It was the first time in nearly 2 weeks he'd worn anything other than linen or house clothes. His tailor-made navy blazer felt like armor. He turned to find Rania standing quietly in the doorway of his room. You're going somewhere? She asked. He nodded. A meeting, just for the evening. She stepped inside, her hands behind her back. Is it far? Marrakesh. I'll be back tonight. She looked down. Zaid knelt in front of her, reaching gently for her chin. You'll be safe here. Layla will stay with you the whole time. The security team knows not to let anyone near you. That's not what I'm scared of, she whispered. Zaid's stomach twisted. Then what is it? She took a deep breath. What if you leave like Mama said you did before? Zaid closed his eyes for a moment, steadying himself. I didn't know you existed, he said. But now I do, and I won't run from it. I won't run from you. Rania nodded once, slowly, as if accepting a new rule of the universe. Then, from behind her back, she pulled out something wrapped in a folded scarf. The same scarf Amina had worn in one of the old photos. It was a small carved figurine, a lion made of wood, worn, chipped, but still strong. She told me to give it to you when I felt it was safe, she said. Zaid took it with trembling fingers. She carved this. Rania nodded. At night, when she missed you, Zaid felt something shift in his chest. Something large and old, like a door that hadn't opened in years. I'll keep it with me, he said. Always. He stood and kissed the top of her head. And then he left. Marrakesh at night was golden fire and murmured secrets. Farid's villa was opulence turned inside out, velvet-lined halls, crystal chandeliers, and rooms that smelled of power and roses. Farid greeted Zayd with a sharp smile and 2 glasses of aged scotch. To old rivals becoming flexible, Zayd didn't drink. He took the glass out of respect and set it down. Get to the point. Farid chuckled and motioned to a private lounge. Inside, blueprints and land contracts were laid out like a game board. I control 3 of the 5 parcels needed to develop the Western Sahara coast. You own the 4th. The 5th is in limbo. Tribal claims, bureaucratic nightmares. But if we work together. Zayd studied the documents. And what do you want in return? Farid smiled. Half of your future hotel rights in Tangier. Zayd laughed once. Cold and sharp. You want half of Tangier for the scrap of sand? I want leverage, Farid said, voice dropping. You've gone soft. Everyone sees it, ever since that girl appeared. Zayd's smile vanished. Farid leaned closer. What's her name? Rania? Sweet little story. But sentiment makes men weak, Zayd. And you were never weak. Zayd rose slowly, eyes burning. You're wrong. Oh. Zayd placed both palms on the table and said with absolute clarity, loving something doesn't make you weak. It makes you dangerous, because now I have something worth fighting for. Farid blinked. Zayd leaned forward. The deal is off, and if you ever mention her again, even in passing, I'll bury every project you touch. He turned and walked out, the lion figurine in his pocket pressing against his thigh like a promise. He returned home at midnight. Rania was asleep on the couch in the living room, curled up under a blanket. Layla sat nearby, reading quietly. When she saw Zayd, she smiled and stood, whispering she wouldn't go to bed. She said she'd wait. Zayd knelt beside the couch, brushing a strand of hair from Rania's forehead. Her eyes fluttered open. You came back. He smiled. Of course I did. She sat up slightly. Did the man try to trick you? Zayd laughed under his breath. He did. Did you win? I didn't even have to fight, he said, because I remembered who I am. She tilted her head. And who's that? He looked her in the eyes. A father. She smiled then, truly for the first time. And in that moment, Zayd knew. The towers could crumble. The world could change, but as long as she looked at him like that, nothing else mattered. He had found the heart he lost. And her name was Rania. The sunrise that broke over Casablanca. The next morning it was warm and golden, washing the Al Rami estate in light the color of honey. The marble tiles shimmered. The olive trees swayed gently in the garden. And for the first time in over a decade, Zayd's heart felt still. Not because life was easy, but because he had finally chosen what mattered. Rania was sitting at the long dining table, her legs swinging under the chair as she traced lines in the sketchbook Layla had given her. She didn't speak much as she drew. She rarely did. But Zayd watched her from the other end of the table with the same reverence one might give to sunrise. Something delicate. Something rare. He had cleared his entire schedule again. No meetings. No flights. No deals. And though his executive assistant, Kareem, had called 4 times that morning, first politely, then frantically, Zayd let the phone ring. Are you drawing something? He asked, walking over with 2 cups of warm milk, one plain, one with honey. Rania nodded. A lion. Zayd smiled and handed her the honey cup. Another one? She looked up. You're not tired of them? Never. She slid the sketchbook toward him. The lion she had drawn was fierce and bold, its mane scribbled in rough spirals, its eyes round and strong. But there was something else, a small figure beside it. A girl, standing calmly next to the lion, her hand resting on its back. Zayd stared. That's you, she said softly. And that's me. He swallowed against the lump in his throat. You're not afraid of the lion? She shook her head. Mama said real lions don't growl. They protect. Zayd reached out and smoothed the edge of the page with his fingers. Then I hope I live up to your drawing. You already do, she whispered. Later that morning, Zayd sat alone in the study. He opened a mahogany box that held a fountain pen he hadn't used in years, a gift from his father, engraved with his name. He pulled out a blank sheet of heavy ivory paper and began to write, slowly, deliberately, with no assistants, no lawyers, no drafts. It was a will, not a full one, not yet, but a handwritten declaration. That Rania al-Rami was his daughter, that she was to inherit his estate, his name, and his protection publicly and legally, that she was not a secret, but a legacy. When he finished, he called Judge El Khoury, a trusted friend of the family, and asked him to come to the estate that afternoon. No questions asked. "I'm bringing my daughter," Zaid said. "I want the world to know." That afternoon, as promised, Judge El Khoury arrived, a man in his 60s, with silver hair and an air of quiet wisdom. He had known Zaid since childhood, had watched him rise, had warned him once that building towers wasn't the same as building a life. Zaid met him at the entrance. "I believe you warned me once," Zaid said with a tired smile. "I did," the judge replied, eyes twinkling, "but you were too busy playing king. I found something better than a crown." The judge followed him inside. In the sitting room, Rania waited quietly in a white cotton dress, her curls tied back with ribbon, the lion figurine resting beside her on the armrest. She stood when they entered, polite, poised, far older than her years. Zaid knelt beside her. "This is Judge El Khoury. He's going to help me make sure everyone knows what I already do." The judge bowed slightly. "It's an honor, young lady." Rania gave a small, respectful nod. They sat. Zaid handed the judge the handwritten page. As the man read, his brow furrowed, then softened. "This is a bold step," he said quietly. "You'll face scrutiny. Questions." "I don't care," Zaid said. "She deserves more than secrecy. She deserves to be named." The judge folded the paper carefully. "I'll begin the paperwork immediately. We'll start with temporary guardianship and file for full paternity declaration under Moroccan law. It will take time, but not long." Zaid turned to Rania. "Do you understand what that means?" She nodded. "I'll be yours." Zaid's voice cracked. "You've always been mine. This just makes sure the world knows it." Rania looked at the judge. "Can I still use my other name?" "What name is that?" the judge asked kindly. She looked down. "Mama called me Rania Baraka. She said it means blessing." Zaid's heart stopped for a moment. He placed his hand over hers. "You'll always be Baraka," he said. "But now you're also al-Rami, a lion and a blessing." The judge smiled gently. "A powerful name." But not everyone would see it that way. The backlash came fast. Within 24 hours of the judge submitting the first formal documents, social media erupted. Zaid's name began trending across Moroccan and Gulf platforms. Bloggers speculated wildly. A secret affair? An illegitimate child? A publicity stunt? Headlines ranged from billionaire claims African orphan as daughter to hidden heir or humanitarian hoax. Some praised him. Others attacked. Fard, Ever the Vulture, released a statement to press. "While I respect Mr. al-Rami's personal choices, I question the timing and motives. Investors expect clarity, not distractions." Zaid ignored them all. But Rania didn't. She saw the comments. She heard the whispers from the staff. One maid thought she was out of earshot when she muttered, "This girl's going to ruin everything." That night, Rania barely ate. Zaid found her sitting on the cold steps of the back patio, arms wrapped around her knees. "Why do they hate me?" she asked, not looking up. He sat beside her. "They don't hate you, Rania. They're afraid." "Of what?" "Of love that doesn't follow rules. Of stories that don't begin the way they expect." She turned to him, eyes wide. "You didn't follow rules either?" He shook his head. "I broke all of them." She tilted her head. "To find me?" "No," he said softly. "To deserve you." She stared at him for a long moment, then leaned her head against his shoulder. And in the quiet of the night, they sat like that, a lion and his blessing, while the world outside shouted, speculated, and spun its tales. Inside, something deeper was being written, not on paper, but in blood, in breath, in the space between silence and understanding. A story no headline could capture. The air was different that morning. It wasn't just the soft light filtering through the olive trees, or the faint scent of jasmine rising from the courtyard. Something in the house itself felt calmer, like the walls had exhaled after holding their breath for years. The staff moved more gently. Rania's laughter, light as a bird's wings, echoed faintly from the garden as she played with a set of small wooden animals Zaid had carved for her the night before. She was no longer just a guest in the Al-Rami estate. She was its pulse. Zaid watched her from the balcony, sipping thick Arabic coffee, one hand resting on the lion figurine that never left his side. His mind wasn't on business or headlines or even the fallout of the last few weeks. It was on Amina. There were mornings he could almost hear her voice. Not the soft, sweet tone she used when treating patients, but the fierce, sharp rhythm she had reserved for him when he was being arrogant, stubborn, afraid. "You think strength means silence," she had once said. "But the loudest hearts are often the ones that whisper." Zaid smiled faintly and turned back inside. The housekeeper had found it 2 nights ago, the small wooden box wrapped in a faded cloth, buried deep in Ranya's pouch of belongings. She had handed it to Zaid wordlessly, sensing its importance. He hadn't opened it immediately. He'd kept it on his nightstand, letting it sit there like a living thing, waiting to be heard. But now he was ready. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands firm despite the trembling beneath them, and lifted the lid. Inside, the scent of something earthy and old drifted up. There was a folded scarf, the same one Amina had worn the day she left. Beneath it, dried flower petals, flattened carefully like they had been pressed in a book. And tucked under them, a letter. The envelope was thin, marked only with his name in handwriting he knew better than his own. Zaid's breath caught. Slowly, he unfolded the paper. "Zaid, if you're reading this, then I am gone. I don't know how long it took her to find you. I only know she would, because she's strong and brave and stubborn like her father. Yes, you are her father. You were from the moment she took her first breath and opened her eyes like she was already searching for something. I didn't tell you, not because I hated you, not because I didn't trust you. I just didn't want her to be part of your world unless that world had changed. Has it? She's not a charity. She's not a secret. She's not your redemption. She's Rania, and she is the best part of both of us. Don't teach her to chase power. Teach her to chase truth. Let her cry. Let her speak. Let her be small and loud and free until she finds who she is. And don't ever let her think she's less because of where she came from. You used to call me your lioness. You said I reminded you what courage looked like. But you had it too, Zaid. You just didn't believe it. Maybe now you will. If you hold her hand, really hold it, you'll hear the roar in your chest again. She's more than your daughter. She's a part of you that never stopped believing. Don't waste her." Amina. Zaid sat frozen, the paper trembling between his fingers. The letter was not long, but it gutted him. He had spent so many years building towers, collecting art, buying silence. He had mistaken stillness for peace. But Amina had seen through it all. She always had. And now, from beyond death, she had left him the one thing he didn't know he needed, a mirror. He folded the letter slowly, reverently, and placed it back in the box. Then he rose. Rania was in the garden, crouched beneath the lemon tree, lining up the wooden animals in a semicircle. She didn't notice him at first. Zaid watched her in silence, letting the moment breathe. She looked like Amina when she was deep in thought, brows slightly furrowed, lips pursed, hands still even though her eyes were full of movement. Her dress had a grass stain near the hem, and one of her sandals was lying upside down a few feet away. She didn't care. She was building something, a world of her own. He approached quietly. "Rania," he said. She looked up. He knelt beside her, then sat cross-legged on the grass. "I found something," he said gently. "From your mother." Her eyes widened. He pulled the small wooden box from his coat and placed it on her lap. Slowly, she opened it. She stared at the scarf first, then the petals. Her fingers hovered over them like they were too sacred to touch. Then she found the letter. Zaid didn't read it aloud. He waited as she scanned it silently, her lips moving just slightly as she read. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. When she finished, she looked up. "She wrote this for you," Rania said. "But it sounds like it was for me too." Zaid nodded. "It was for both of us." She was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "She was scared you wouldn't want me." Zaid inhaled sharply. She was wrong. She was afraid you'd forget. He placed a hand over her small fingers. "I forgot who I was, but I didn't forget her. Or you." She looked up, her chin lifting slightly. I think she forgives you. Zayd blinked. You think she forgives me? Rania nodded. She told me, before she died, that you were lost, not cruel. Zayd's throat tightened so hard it hurt to speak. And what do you think? Rania paused. Then she smiled. I think you found your way home. They sat together in the garden for a long time, the shadows of the trees dancing around them. When Zayd stood, he didn't walk back inside like a man finishing a moment. He bent down, scooped Rania into his arms, lion cub, and carried her back toward the house. That evening, Zayd stood before a podium at the Casablanca Children's Foundation's annual charity gala. The ballroom was packed with royalty, business moguls, and celebrities. Photographers flashed, and murmurs filled the air as a reclusive billionaire finally stepped into the spotlight. He didn't talk about stocks. He didn't talk about construction projects. He talked about love. My name is Zayd Al-Rami, he said calmly. Many of you know me as a builder of towers, of markets, of cities. But tonight, I want you to know me as something else, a father. He gestured gently toward the side of the stage, where Rania stood, wearing a simple white dress, the lion figurine in her hand. She changed everything, he said. She reminded me that some things are worth more than legacy, more than gold. She taught me how to be brave again. And tonight, I announce the creation of the Rania Foundation to fund healthcare and education for abandoned children across Africa and the Middle East, in her name, in her mother's honor. The room erupted in applause. But all Zayd cared about was a smile on Rania's face, full, radiant, unafraid. After the speech, she ran into his arms. And for the first time since Amina died, the roar in his chest returned, not of power, but of love